Okay, guys, we're going to do a short story. And of course, it's written by me. And this is presented to you by the House of Rakai's Written Works. Okay? All right, perfect. All right, we're just going to get started because I'm not sure what the name of it is yet. I'll put the name on when I'm finished. Zanya just got out the shower and she wrapped her hair up with a towel and so that it can dry. She walks into the kitchen and she puts on a pot of tea. From there, she goes into her bedroom and sits next to her husband and says, "I love you. So everything about you sometimes just makes me want to just thank God even more. I really appreciate you." Stephen looks at her and says, "Baby, I need to talk to you about something." She looks concerned. "Yes? What's going on, honey?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "This might be bad timing." He said, "Honey, get it out. You're worrying me. Is everything okay?" "I met someone." "Huh?" "Yeah, and we've been seeing each other for about 3 years now, and, what? 3 years? But we're married." I know, but that's why I'm coming clean, honey. It's more. There's more. Okay. So Zion sat there, just numb, just looking at her husband's mouth as his words just fumbled out of him, and every last one of the words traveled into her heart, like with ice picks, and just like it was stabbing her over and over and over again. She was devastated. She couldn't believe that the man she loved so much and adored and would do anything for would betray her so badly, and not just. I mean, he was in a relationship. 3 years? What did she do wrong? So she looked at him and stopped him as she was talking with tears filled in her eyes. "Stephen, what did I do? I thought I was a perfect wife. I thought I did everything right with you. You never addressed anything and said something was wrong with the way I love you. Is this the end?" "Honey, it has to be." "What?" So she gets up. She goes into the kitchen. Leaves Stevens there in the bedroom. She goes through the drawer. And she grabs a water gun. She fills it up. She puts it behind her back. And she walks into the bedroom and she looks at Stephen and she said, "Listen here. I gave you 12 years of my life. And all I've been to you is good. And you sit here and you just tell me about some other woman and you've been in a relationship for 3 years after I dedicated my life to you?" So she pulls it slowly from behind her back, and Stephen grew concerned, and he was just watching as she pulled it from behind her back. And she pointed it at him. And she got to squirting. She said, "Count that as you being lucky. That's all you deserve." She said, "You're washed up. And then she went into her drawer. She grabbed some jogging pants and some socks and a sweatshirt. She put it on, threw her gym shoes on, and grabbed her coat. And Stephen was wet and looking at her, and he said, "Honey, he was confused." He said, "Well, what is this?" And she said, "Your wash time." So she grabbed her keys off the dresser drawer and walked out. Headed to the door, unlocked it, hit the alarm onto her car. Boop, boop. She goes to the car and sits down and turns on the car, and the music just begins to blare, and she turned it down some, and she raised up the window because it was slightly cracked, and she turned on her heat because it was a bit chilly outside, and her hair was still wet. Zion pulled off. She just drove. She was on the road. And Stephen just began to call her, and he called her over and over again. And Zion just laughed, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you're washed up." I mean, he just kept calling. So Zion finally pulled into a parking lot. She looked around before she got out just to see if anybody was there. The parking lot was vacant. So she goes inside, and she looks at the person behind the desk, and she said, "I need a room for one." And the person looks back at her and just looks her over, and he said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need your ID." And he said, "Are you paying credit card or cash?" "I got a credit card." And he says, "Okay, well, I need both your credit card and your ID, ma'am." So Zion goes into her purse and hands it over to him just like that. He said, "Okay." He said, "Give me 1 second and I'll get you all booked." So Zion waited there patiently. And he looked over at her again, and she just looked so far away. Yet she was right there. And then her phone began to ring again, and he looked at her as in to say, "Are you going to answer that?" And Zion just still looked so far away. And so he just minded his business and went back to checking her into room 707. He said, "Ma'am, I got you all set. You're going to be in room 707. So he gives her the keys, and he gives her back her credit card and her ID. So her phone just ringing off the hook. And so finally she looked at her phone, and she laughed. She laughed hysterically. Zion felt a little insane from the news she just heard from her husband, and so she put her phone on silent, and she hits the elevator and pushes the 7th floor. She goes right on up, and she gets to the room. She unlocks the door and goes right on inside. She flips on the light switch, and she just looks all around, and just to look at the room, and had a weird smell, but all she knew is that Stephen wasn't there, and that gave her a sense of peace. So she walked around and just to see all that was inside the room. She went to the television and picked up the remote and turned it on. Went through the guide and set it on CSI. She said, "He's lucky I'm not a..." He's lucky. All I had was a water gun. I can't believe, Stephen, all this time that I've given him all these years, and he betrays me like that. How can he do this to me? I'm going to call my lawyer in the morning, see if we can get this resolved.